When the Italian Mafia boss discovers a crying waitress, an incredible transformation is revealed. The clatter of dishes and the chatter of hungry patrons filled the air in the diner, an oasis of normalcy amidst the chaos of Brooklyn. But Amelia felt like a ghost among the clamor, slipping from table to table, serving up plates dripping with grease and mystery. At 26, she was exhausted, fighting against responsibilities that threatened to consume her entirely. Just a room away, her mother lay frail and fading, hoarding all of Amelia's dreams in the depths of her illness. The rent was due, bills were piling, and each smiling face Amelia encountered felt like a cruel reminder of her lost aspirations as an artist. One evening, amidst a particularly chaotic dinner rush, the pressure mounted. Amelia's hands trembled as she juggled 3 plates and a cup of coffee, frustration gnawing at her resolve. With her heart racing, she ducked into the back room, desperate for a moment to breathe. She barely noticed the shadow looming in the corner as tears flowed silently, cascading down her cheeks, soaking the napkin in her hand. The suffocating weight of hopelessness pressed down harder than all the orders she had to fill that night. Giovanni, the notorious Italian Mafia boss, sat just beyond the kitchen door, a commanding presence obscured by the smoke of his cigarette. He could hear her sobs, quiet yet piercing, and rather than grasping his phone to handle business as usual, he stepped forward, compelled by an unfamiliar instinct to shield this vulnerable creature in a world that had shown her no mercy. Offering a napkin, he broke the silence, an unexpected softness echoing in his voice. "What's got you in such a state?" he asked, his words heavy yet gentle. Amelia blinked at the imposing figure before her, half expecting the judgment that normally followed someone like him. But shock turned into reluctant conversation. As they talked, he shared snippets of his life, a life filled with regrets and loneliness, marked by no reunions but only shadows of a daughter he barely knew. The understanding stirred something deep within Amelia. Here was a man chained by a world as unforgiving as hers, a world built on tradition and obligation. As their exchange deepened, Giovanni urged her to abandon despair and embrace her art. He believed in talents considered irrelevant by society. Amelia felt embers of hope beginning to flicker, but uncertainty gnawed at her. Could she dare to reclaim her dreams, knowing that her mother depended on her? The diner bustled around them, immune to their moment. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. Giovanni's phone buzzed, a grim reminder of the violent world he buried himself in. His heart sank as he glanced at it, torn between the responsibilities of his empire and the risks that crept closer. The diner, usually bright with laughter and clinking dishes, now thickened with the tension of unspoken threats. Amelia sketched furiously on a notepad, her expression lively and determined, a contrast to Giovanni's troubled gaze. But the air shifted when the door swung open, and a familiar figure stepped in, casting a shadow over all they had shared. Giovanni's heart raced, his world inching perilously close to the chaos he had hoped to escape. As he faced the looming decision ahead, the realization struck him: protecting the dreams of this waitress might redefine him. Battered by the past, he felt the urgency of choosing a future unbound by blood or circumstance. The stakes had never felt higher. Would he prioritize his empire or become the catalyst for Amelia's long-dormant dreams? Amelia's world had shrunk to the confines of that diner, with its peeling linoleum floors and factory-style lights casting harsh glows on shifting shadows. But Giovanni had ignited a flicker of ambition within her that she thought had long been extinguished. While he wrestled with the tensions of his empire outside, all she could cling to were the sketches that flowed from her once eager hands. With each stroke of the pencil, her dreams transformed into vibrant pigments on the paper, a stark contrast to the gray reality of her life. Sitting in the back room with Giovanni's looming presence almost forgotten, Amelia's resolve began to firm. No longer was she the frightened daughter, consumed by responsibilities that stifled her creativity. The thoughts danced around her mind like music long silenced. What if? The words echoed. What if she could somehow bridge the gap between her obligations at home and her desire to create? Giovanni's voice fractured her thoughts. Amelia, you can start small. You've got a vision. Challenge yourself to bring it to life. What is stopping you? The weight of his question lingered, a profound challenge that compelled her to reflect more deeply than she thought possible. Everything. Her voice trembled as the raw honesty spilled forth. My mother, the rent, the bills, it all seems insurmountable. I don't even know if I have what it takes anymore. There was a vulnerability in her admission, but it felt liberating. Yet the familiar sting of self-doubt clawed back, a stark warning against dreaming. The thought of pursuing her art was intoxicating but terrifying. Her fingers hesitated, hovering over the pencil. Giovanni stepped closer, his imposing figure somehow reassuring in this moment. You're more capable than you know, he insisted, confidence ringing in his voice. She met his steady gaze, drawn to the fierce conviction behind those dark eyes. It was a light she craved. Maybe I could start a small piece just for me, she replied, cautious yet hopeful. Do it, he urged, seeing not just a waitress but the artist beneath. Use this moment. Let it be your spark. Commit to it, Amelia. With each word, the embers glowed brighter within her. The notion swayed back and forth in her mind, illuminating a part of her she'd buried under layers of adults' fears and expectations. But the shadows outside the diner deepened as Giovanni's phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. She could see the tension creeping back across his face, a reminder that their worlds were vastly different. I need to go, he said abruptly, the warmth dissipating. But I'll be watching you. The door closed behind him, and uncertainty flooded back in, but a new sense of determination cocooned Amelia in its embrace. Reality pressed against her once again, like hands gripping the edges of her art, coaxing it back to life. As the diner's chatter faded and the clattering of plates grew distant, Amelia felt a shift within, a call to action that demanded to be answered. The next morning, as sunlight pierced through the diner's window, the weight of Giovanni's challenge settled in. Amelia gathered her courage, her resolve cementing. There was little time to waste. She would begin her piece, regardless of the fear that flared within. Each stroke would push against the constrainment of her daily life, a manifestation of everything she longed to express. But what if she truly succeeded? What implications did that hold, not just for her, but for Giovanni as well? The question hovered as she dipped the brush into the paint, the colors swirling anxiously together. With every brushstroke, she wrestled against the tether of responsibility. But would the looming confrontation of her choices intertwine her fate with a man who dwelled in darkness? And how would this commitment to artistry affect the path Giovanni had just stepped back into? She could feel the weight of her aspirations pressing against her courage, her individuality battling the chains that had bound her. Determined to break free, she painted, the canvas became a reflection of her inner turmoil. And triumph alike. In that moment, the door opened again, and a familiar figure stepped through, casting a new shadow on her burgeoning dreams. Her heart raced, a mix of hope and dread, as she faced yet another challenge, one that could tip the scales of her transformation into an unimaginable reality. Amelia's brush stilled, inches from the canvas, as she recognized the figure who had just entered the diner. Marco, Giovanni's estranged brother, known for his charisma and unpredictable nature, leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, his dark eyes scanning the room with a practiced ease. Panic surged through Amelia. Had Giovanni sent him to check on her? Or was it purely coincidence? Her heart raced, a disquieting mixture of excitement and fear. In that instant, all the tentative artistry she had begun to weave felt vulnerable and exposed. Hey there, Amelia, Marco called, breaking her reverie. His tone was light, but she could hear an undercurrent of something far more serious beneath. Haven't seen you around much. Heard you've been busy painting. The attention pinned her in place. Just, experimenting, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He approached, the confidence in his stride compelling and predatory. His presence was magnetic, but there was an edge to it that sent jolts of apprehension down her spine. You should get out more. You know, experience the world outside this place, he suggested, tilting his head as if appraising her and her work. What's keeping you here? Fear. Amelia grappled with the words stuck in her throat. He was right, fear had been her constant companion, always lurking in those quiet, desperate moments. I have responsibilities, things to take care of, she finally replied, attempting to counter his challenge but feeling the weight of her truth stifle her resolve. Responsibilities. Sure. Marco's smile widened, but his eyes narrowed, revealing an analytical edge. But what about your dreams? Your talent? Isn't it time you turned your fears into motivation? His question hung palpably in the air, a penetrating gaze that seemed to unravel her layers of self-doubt. The room felt stifling as she wrestled internally with the duality of her existence, the waitress by day, the artist struggling to breathe in the dark corners of her mind. You don't get it, she said, a flicker of anger igniting within her. You see this as a struggle. I see it as survival. She gestured towards the scattered sketches on her table, witnessing herself become defensive, revealing her vulnerability. Survival? Marco echoed, a hint of intrigue coating his otherwise dismissive tone. You really think you're the only one playing it safe in this world? I can assure you that those convinced they're just surviving are often missing the chance to thrive. Maybe it's time for a wake-up call. His challenge echoed in her mind like a twisted form of encouragement. Could she thrive? The notion felt surreal, almost laughable against the backdrop of her gritty reality. Yet here she was, being prodded by a man whose life danced dangerously along the edges of power and chaos. What's your definition of thriving? She asked, curiosity edging her voice. He stepped closer, invading her personal space, but rather than confusion, it sparked something in Amelia, curiosity woven with a hint of dread. Having the guts to take control, to defy what's expected of you. It's about daring to live. Tell me, Amelia, what's your true dream? What will you risk to achieve it? His question rippled through her, igniting flair and confusion at once. Whispers of unanswered ambitions swirled: the dream of an artist, the fear of failing, and the call to break free from the responsibilities that clung to her. Who do you want to be? Marco pressed, leaning closer, his presence commanding. The inquiry tore through her defenses and opened her eyes to a reality that felt tantalizingly close yet painfully far. It was a pivotal moment, a moment teetering dangerously on the precipice of a choice that had implications extending beyond just herself. She started, her voice wavering as uncertainty flooded her thoughts. The diner's mundane reality cocooned them, yet everything that had been familiar felt oddly foreign. Amelia sensed the walls closing in, the weight of expectations crashing hard against aspirations. Here, in front of Marco, stood a critical juncture: the chance to redefine who she could become. Make a choice, Amelia, he said softly, the challenge in his eyes now paired with something akin to understanding. You've got the gift. Don't let it wither under doubt. But choose wisely. The paths ahead are treacherous and exhilarating. His words ignited a spark within her, coaxing out the potential she had buried for too long. What was she willing to risk? In the throes of this confrontation and with the burden of her potential weighing heavy in the air, Amelia realized she stood on the cusp of her transformation. A breach within her heart widened, and beneath the raw edge of fear thrummed excitement. The challenge hung in the air like a fragile thread, beckoning with the unvoiced promise of change. Could she embrace it? Could she step into the surge of her innermost truth? As she aligned her gaze with Marco's, she felt the weight of the world shift. Whatever decision she made next would ripple through the tapestry of her life, intertwining her fate with individuals far beyond her existing framework. The choice felt imminently close, but would she seize it or let it slip away? Amelia's breath caught as she stood on the brink of decision, heart pounding against her chest, each beat a reminder of life's delicate choices. Marco's presence loomed, a magnet drawing her toward the possibilities she had only ever whispered to herself. She met his gaze, a mix of defiance and vulnerability flickering within her. The diner, with its familiar clatter and steady hum, felt worlds away from the uncertain future waiting just beyond the glass door. "What do you want from me?" The question fled her lips, laden with urgency. Was it her talent he truly wanted to ignite, or was it just another game to him? He shrugged, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "I want you to see what you're capable of, Amelia. You're not just a waitress, you're an artist. And artists, they don't just occupy space, they fill it. They shape it." His words coiled through her, tightening around her mind. He had seen beyond the waitress uniform to the person she kept hidden beneath layers of responsibility. Yet, the fear of venturing into the unknown clenched her stomach like a vice. What would she become if she dared to step into the canvas of her dreams? "Painting is just a hobby," Amelia protested weakly, though she felt the lie sour on her tongue. "I don't have time to chase whims." Yet a flicker of longing kindled deep within, begging to be acknowledged. "You say that now," Marco countered, his voice soothing yet challenging. "But what if your whim is your calling? It's time to trade survival for daring to dream. Are you really willing to shrink yourself to fit into a life that doesn't satisfy?" With every word he spoke, she felt the dormant artist inside her churning, fierce and restless. "What if I try and fail?" she whispered, apprehensive. "What if you fly?" Marco replied sharply, stepping back to regard her more fully. "The fear of failure is only as strong as the willingness to succumb to it. Stand up to it, Amelia. You have more power than you know." Amelia's mind raced, her internal conflict almost audible. She could see it now, almost vividly, the vibrant hues splashing across white canvases, her hand dancing with the brush, releasing everything trapped inside her mind. But it clashed with the stark realities of her life, responsibilities looming like shadows preventing her from breaking free. "Everything in my life ties me down. My family, my job." The protest tumbled from her lips, yet it felt increasingly fragile under Marco's unwavering gaze. "Other people's expectations won't define your life unless you let them," Marco replied, voice firm yet resonating with an understanding she craved. "What do you want for yourself? Don't allow fear to distort your vision, see clearly, Amelia." For the first time, she truly felt the weight of his words. They sank into her, a heavy yet liberating truth. "I just want to find my voice," she admitted, quiet but real, her trembling hands finally betraying her vulnerability. "To be brave enough to speak it." Her heart raced with exhilaration as the idea crystallized. Could she infuse her art with her truths? The fleeting enthusiasm began to drown out the incessant echoes of doubt, awakening something fierce within her. "Then start speaking," Marco replied, smiling softly. "Create, embrace what fills you, even if it's messy. That's how you'll fill this diner with your art. Step into yourself fully, not just in this moment but consistently. Commit to your voice, and flourish like your paintings will." Amelia's resolve surged within her, daring her to dream beyond the confines of her responsibilities. The warring factions inside her began reaching a new consensus. Maybe I can't keep waiting for permission," she said softly, her fingers barely brushing her paintbrush. The prospect felt thrilling yet terrifying. "Not quite maybe anymore, Amelia." Marco's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, pulling her closer to the edge of something exciting. "What action are you willing to take tonight?" The diner lights flickered above them, casting a warm glow. A challenge lay before her, one that would unveil the artist. She concealed under layers of caution. As uncertainty twisted like a knife in her gut, the sensation of possibility wrapped around her like a cloak. This felt not just like a doorway, it was a threshold to a new beginning. "Tonight," she began, an unexpected clarity sharpening her voice. "Tonight, I'll start a painting." With that declaration, she found herself standing at the precipice of choice, aware that this decision could change everything. Would it be enough to propel her toward the artist she longed to become, into a world that demanded she unveil her true self? In that moment of revelation, possibilities shimmered tantalizingly at the edge of her imagination. Little did she know, Marco's challenge had set in motion a series of events that would unearth more than just her artistic spirit. It would also test her against shadows from her past that were waiting to resurface. The way forward brimmed with excitement and dread. Could she embrace the chaos of her own tendencies and those lurking in her life, or would she risk being swept up in a storm she couldn't control? Amelia stood behind the counter, paintbrush in hand, struggling to merge the cacophony of hopes and fears swirling in her mind. The diner around her buzzed with familiar faces, but all she could focus on was the small canvas propped up against the far wall. It had become a waiting vessel for the colors of her emotions, yet it remained untouched. The weight of Marco's expectations hung heavily on her, igniting a strange mix of exhilaration and paralyzing anxiety. "Just let go," she muttered to herself, tapping the paintbrush against the counter. Each tap sounded like a countdown. Time was slipping, and soon the opportunity to start would dissolve like the early morning fog. She glanced at the canvas, the stark white surface taunting her with its potential. What would she even paint? The visions of color and texture that had once danced so freely in her mind now felt stifled, chained by insecurity and doubt. Memories of past failures forced themselves into her thoughts, reminding her of every moment she had backed away from a challenge. Amelia closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. If she was going to ignite this new journey, she needed to confront her past grievances. Wasn't it that what artists did capture truth in its rawest form? With a determined flick of her wrist, she applied the first stroke of paint onto the canvas. It was tentative but firm, a bright blue burst, her hope surging to the surface. With each additional brushstroke, she felt an exhilarating rush, as if the colors were breathing life into the shadows that had loomed over her for too long. She didn't just paint the canvas, she painted her fears, her desires, and a burgeoning identity she feared had been lost. Hours slipped by unnoticed, the diner patrons fading into an abstract blur of conversations and laughter. The scent of coffee and fried food created an odd comfort, grounding her as she hovered on the precipice of self-discovery. Brush in hand, she allowed herself to become consumed by the creative process, every color revealing more about herself than she had ever anticipated. Yet with this newfound clarity emerged a familiar, lurking anxiety. She recalled the holiday dinners, the pressure to conform to family expectations, her mother's disappointed sighs. Those were the shadows that made drawing lines between duty and desire so agonizing. How would she balance her aspirations against obligations to those she loved? The fear gripped her, unraveling the courage she had just mustered. Amelia stepped back, dampening her brush in a cup of water. She couldn't allow hesitation to undermine the painting. The expression within it was too raw, too beautiful to dim with self-doubt. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her younger sister. "Mom is asking when you'll come over this weekend. She wants to know if you're bringing your new project." A tide of guilt washed over her. Here, in this moment of creation, that familiar expectation clawed its way back to the forefront. Was it selfish to pursue her own voice when family obligations beckoned? With each passing second, the pull of blood ties rushed towards her like an avalanche. But what good would it do to ignore her own purpose? Wasn't that the very sacrifice she had promised herself she would not make? Marco's challenge echoed in her ear. Could she navigate this complexity with grace? The answer was lurking beneath the layers she began to unravel. Amelia took a deep breath, feeling the fire of resolve rekindle. Tonight, she would let the truth of her voice resonate not just on the canvas, but within her entire life. The weight of family legacy wouldn't break her, it would fuel her resilience. With renewed vigor, she took up her brush once more, color pouring forth with renewed passion. But just as she lost herself to the rhythm of creation, the door swung open abruptly, and a rush of cold air entered, along with a silhouette that threw an unsettling shadow across her canvas. "Amelia." Marco's voice carried uncertainty. What is going on here? His eyes widened as they swept over the remarkable transformation taking place on the canvas, blending the familiar with the unexpected. Caught between the thrill of her artistic revelation and Marco's probing gaze, Amelia found herself at yet another crossroads. Could she reveal the deepest layers of her essence without fear or shame? Would she be ready to embrace not just the artist, but the person she was becoming in that very moment? Amelia felt a jolt of surprise at Marco's entrance, as if the canvas had suddenly come alive, demanding her undivided attention. His presence ignited a series of emotions, and a rush of vulnerability surged through her. How could she explain the thoughts and feelings now splattered across the canvas? "Amelia, this is incredible," Marco said, stepping closer, his expression shifting between admiration and perplexity. "You've really poured yourself into this." She sensed the shift in the air, the weight of expectations hanging between them like an unspoken challenge. Marco was known for his sharp perceptions, and she felt scrutinized under his inquisitive gaze. How was she to reconcile this moment with the expectations imposed by her family? Would her passion be perceived as sheer folly? I didn't know if I could do it," Amelia confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "But as soon as I started, everything just flowed." His eyes searched hers, and she wondered if he could sense her internal conflict, the nagging guilt that tugged her toward family obligations. Could he understand that the marks she made on the canvas were also marks of her independence? Art had always felt like a distant dream, something frivolous against the weight of familial duty. Each brushstroke felt like a rebellion against the very identity she felt she was slowly losing. "Why not embrace it?" he replied, a tone of encouragement slipping through his words. "This could be your breakthrough." His support was a balm, yet it left her feeling exposed. Could she harness that encouragement to push aside the anxieties that clouded her vision? After all, embracing her artistic side meant unveiling a part of herself she had buried for far too long. A part that wanted to scream in vibrant hues, but was tempered by a quiet voice that whispered of inadequacies. As if drawn by an invisible thread, Amelia returned her focus to the canvas. The strokes were bold and unapologetic now, transforming into a vivid scene that captured the chaos of emotions entangled within her. The uncertainty she felt was swirling into something tangible, almost narrative, like a storyboard of her fears and desires laid bare for anyone to interpret. "Why do you think you've held back?" Marco's voice cut through the ambient noise of the diner, pulling her gaze back to him. The question hung heavy in the air, forcing her to confront her patterns, her hesitance. It gnawed at her, a challenge to transform her reflections into confrontations. "I guess I was afraid of disappointing everyone. Sometimes it feels easier to just fit into what others expect." "You're your own person, Amelia." His tone held a firmness that encouraged her to unravel tightly woven expectations. "You only get one chance to express yourself. Why sacrifice that?" Those words hit home. She felt the echo of her sister's earlier message drumming in her mind, combining with Marco's encouragement to formulate a question she had long avoided. What if she chose herself, unapologetically? What might be waiting on the other side of that choice? With renewed clarity, she dipped her brush into a palette of fiery reds and oranges, her determination marching forward like an army ready to declare war on her fears. The swirls and curves began to assemble into a landscape of her aspirations, one that was fierce, defiant, and completely her own. Marco observed her closely, and she caught a glimmer of understanding in his gaze. He was witnessing something profound, not just with the canvas, but within her. And for the first time, she felt the tendrils of self-doubt recede just enough to crack the door open for liberation. But then, a wave of uncertainty crashed down again as the reality of her family obligations loomed ever nearer. Just as she felt her promise to honor her voice solidifying, another stark reminder flickered in her mind: her mother's disappointment. Could she really pursue her own happiness without tearing her family ties asunder? Would they even understand the new Amelia? "I just don't want to let anyone down," she murmured, half to herself and half to Marco. His expression softened. "You're not just a reflection of their choices. You're becoming an artist. Discovering who you are, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. What do you really want? That direct question was a slicing wind of reality. It was time to confront the truth, but as she opened her mouth to respond, the bell over the diner door jingled again, and another figure stepped into the warm space, her mother. Amelia's heart sank. The moment of resolve hung in the air like a fragile string. Would she choose to pursue her passion or shield herself against expectations? A decision was looming on the horizon, but the form of that choice felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The moment of truth was dawning, and she felt the heat of the brush in her hand ready to ignite her canvas, but uncertain of the fire it would stir in her life. Amelia's breath caught in her throat as her mother swept into the diner, radiating an aura of authority that had always made the air feel thick around her. Her sharp gaze scanned the room until it locked onto Amelia, eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly as if assessing the very essence of her daughter's being. "Amelia," she called, her tone leaving little space for rebellion. "We need to talk." The moment felt charged, a brewing storm of narrative possibility, and Amelia felt her pulse quicken. Marco stepped slightly back, respect for the looming familial mythos written all over his face. She wanted to turn and tell him that this was not how she envisioned this confrontation unfolding, not here, not now, not when she was so close to affirming her own identity. But the words were stuck, muted by the sheen of anxiety coating her tongue. "Why are you here, Mom?" she asked, forcing her voice steady even as a quiver betrayed her. The brush lost momentum in her hand, hovering above the vibrant strokes she had just laid down. "Your father and I are worried," her mother began, crossing her arms as she moved closer. "Your work at the diner, this art thing. It's troubling." That single word struck like a gavel, echoing through Amelia's mind. Troubling. All those years of silent polishing and nurturing her hidden passions only to be reduced to a single term. "It's not just a phase," Amelia protested, standing a bit taller and bolstered by the weight of Marco's gaze behind her. "I want to pursue my art. It's who I am." Her mother's mouth tightened as she processed this declaration. "Who you are? You think your passion matters to your family's expectations? Amelia, what about your future? This won't pay the bills. What will our friends say?" With each accusatory word, Amelia felt a visceral rejection of the world she had been taught to uphold. It blasted through the self-doubt she thought had consumed her, illuminating the very conflict she had faced for far too long. Her aspirations warred against the obligations of heritage, morality, and duty. "Mom, I can't live my life trapped in someone else's idea of success," she asserted, disbelief reflecting off the words fired with newly ignited determination. Each syllable felt like a brushstroke on the canvas of her authenticity, revealing layers of depth she never thought she could articulate. "You sound naive, Amelia," her mother replied, her voice clipped, betraying the tension weaving between them. "I sound like someone who wants to grow." She shot back, emotions spiraling into a crescendo. "I want to embrace who I can be, not who you want me to be. Art is my chosen path, and I won't apologize for it." A heavy silence formed as the words settled between them, and for a moment, time stood still. In that suspended reality, Amelia saw her mother's flinch, the crack in the shielded facade that had been crafted over decades. "Do you truly think it will be that simple?" her mother asked, intensity bubbling beneath her assertion. "Pursuing art, it's not something you can just dip into when it feels convenient." This inflection in her mother's tone caught Amelia's attention like a flick of light, illuminating a vital truth about her family history and understanding born from fear, not disdain. Perhaps her mother had once harbored dreams of her own, sacrificed to uphold an image, just like Amelia had feared she would. "What if pursuing what I love isn't just for me?" Amelia found herself saying, as if determining her path in those very moments. "What if it makes me stronger? What if it changes how I contribute to the family rather than detracting from it?" The challenge hung in the air. This wasn't an act of defiance. This felt transformative, layering intent into her identity. She could feel Marco watching, his silence both supportive and expectant. Amelia, her mother's voice trembled slightly, uncharacteristically devoid of combative firmness. I still want to protect you. Stop trying to protect the idea of me, and let me become who I really am, Amelia retorted, feeling the weight of that decision swirling again, a choice not just for herself, but for a new, open dialogue with her family. Yet doubt crept back, whispering about the scars of rebellion against years of expectation. The impending questions of how to navigate this unfamiliar territory enveloped her like a fog. The showdown in the diner was not just about artistic ambition, it held the promise for deeper understanding and the challenge to embrace not only her voice but the reverberations it would create in her relationships. Suddenly, Marco's presence became a tether. He approached, his tone steady. Amelia, this is your story too. No matter what happens with your family, this is about defining your path. That thought hung before her, eliciting possibilities she could scarcely grasp. But just as she felt like she was on the verge of claiming her authenticity, the phone buzzed in her pocket, an urgent reminder from her sister about a family dinner drawing near. It would mark a chance for Amelia to confront not just her mother, but the entire family. With determination starting to clash with fear again, she braced for what lay ahead. But standing at the intersection of self-discovery, she couldn't ignore the tension rising in her chest. Perhaps her art could mold this encounter, a way to express her choices, her independence. As she turned her attention back to her canvas, that vibrant explosion now felt loaded with purpose. The question lingered: how could she blend her artistic passion with the expectations doled out by her family? A decisive action was waiting. Would she dare to paint her truth for them to see? Each stroke could carry the weight of her inner turmoil, yet allow release. The challenge pulsed through her veins. Amelia needed to forge ahead, but the confrontation wouldn't weight her artistic soul, and family expectations now beckoned her to action. Amelia stood in the diner, her hands trembling slightly as the echoes of her mother's words lingered in the air. The creativity that once flowed freely seemed to swirl with uncertainty, creating an unsettling mix of hope and trepidation. She wanted to channel her emotions into art, but the chaotic thoughts in her mind clouded her vision. As Marco discreetly arranged the cups at the counter, his presence was a quiet reminder of the support she needed. She gazed at her canvas, a swirling mix of colors which, in this moment, felt misleadingly optimistic. It was an internal battle: should she let the weight of expectation distort her artistic expression, or could she unfold her truth into something profound? Doubt crept back in like an unwanted shadow. What if her mother was right? What if chasing after art would lead to disappointment, financial struggle, and familial loss? The nagging voice whispered about safety nets and carefully curated paths of success. Yet, a steadier voice began to rise within her, one that questioned those traditional values. She felt a pulse of rebellion. Shouldn't she explore the layers of her identity that remained untouched? What if her art could serve as her shield, her armor against judgment? The thought invigorated her, filling her with a deep-rooted sense of purpose. With renewed determination, she picked up a brush, her fingers gripping it like a wand of possibility. Amelia began to paint, strokes guided by the rhythm of her heartbeat, reflecting her truth. She created an abstract representation of the conflicting emotions she had just experienced. Fractured shapes emerged on the canvas, mirroring her internal struggle, sharp yet vibrant, chaotic yet purposeful. With every twist of her wrist, she poured her fears, hopes, and defiance into her work, feeling lighter as she unveiled her psyche in color. An idea flickered: what if this piece became more than just a work of art? What if she brought it to the family dinner and used it to communicate her journey? The thought sparked a lightning bolt of clarity. This would not just be a medium, it could become a dialogue, a visual expression of her identity and aspirations that words hadn't fully captured yet. Suddenly, the phone buzzed again, a reminder of the dinner closing in. She could already picture herself cornered by well-meaning relatives, their voices echoing with the same concerns she had just navigated with her mother. But instead of succumbing to potential dread, Amelia forged ahead, ready to paint her narrative over theirs. The thought solidified within her: family dinners had always been harbingers of expectations, yet they also presented opportunities for change. If she could embed her truth into her art, perhaps it could function as the catalyst to dissolve long-standing tensions. It would serve as an anchor, a bridge to her family's understanding. Armed with her canvas, she would confront her fears with an image threaded through her own journey. Marco walked over, peering at her evolving piece. "What are you planning?" he asked, curiosity shining in his eyes. "I'm going to bring my art to the dinner," Amelia replied with newfound confidence. "It's my way of asserting who I am, of showing them that my art isn't just a phase." "Brilliant," he said with an encouraging nod. "Let them see the real you. Just be prepared, they might react differently than you expect." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Would her family accept her authentic self, or would they dismiss her art as a fleeting whim? The tension prickled at her skin, a constant reminder that she was stepping into uncharted territory. Still, she held her breath, her heart racing, as excitement mingled with fear. With her resolve sharpening, Amelia dipped the brush into vibrant red. The color pulsed against the canvas like her own heartbeat, each stroke echoing the sentiment of a new distance between her aspirations and her family's expectations. As the diner's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, amplifying the stakes of her narrative, Amelia prepared herself for the upcoming dinner, a stage where her aspirations would clash with familial ideals. The swirling uncertainty left her compelled, eager for release yet anxious for confrontation. Would her family embrace her artistic identity, or would the ensuing battle push her further into isolation? As she painted with fervor, the question lingered, an uncharted horizon awaited her revelation, and the family dinner would be her proving ground. The hours passed like a blur, each stroke of her brush a cathartic release that chipped away at her internal conflicts. Amelia lost track of time as vibrant colors wove their stories across the canvas. With the diner's ambience fading into a background hum, her world narrowed down to the art, the raw edges of her emotion forming a tapestry of truth. As the pieces of her reality began aligning on the canvas, Amelia realized that this artistic transformation was far more than just an expression. It was a declaration of her identity, one that had been overshadowed by the weight of family approval and societal expectations. Each color became an assertion of her right to exist beyond preconceived boundaries. She was no longer just the rebellious daughter, she was an artist with a voice deserving of recognition. She took a step back and scrutinized her creation. The vibrant red spoke of her passion, the deep blues reflected her melancholy, and hints of yellow emerged like shards of hope. It was chaotic yet striking, much like her journey. But as the diner began to quiet, signaling the imminent arrival of dinner time, a wave of doubt washed over her once more. Would they see the truth in her art, or would they dismiss her heartfelt effort as an adolescent whim? The thought pierced through the pride she had built. With the painting in front of her, she contemplated the upcoming confrontation. Amelia's heart raced as she envisioned her family's reactions. Would their initial surprise fade into disapproval, much like the shrinking number of patrons in the diner? She clutched her brush tightly, grappling with an overwhelming blend of excitement and fear. She needed to find a way to anticipate their responses and plan how to support her artistic identity amid their inevitable skepticism. Suddenly, an idea struck her. What if she prepared a narrative to accompany her piece? A mini monologue that would allow her to articulate the emotions embedded within each brushstroke. It would provide her loved ones with context, a glimpse into her turbulent internal landscape, forging a connection through vulnerability. This revelation ignited a flicker of bravery within her. Driven by the momentum, Amelia grabbed a notebook from her bag and began scribbling her thoughts. She poured her feelings into words, contemplating each one as if they were the very colors on her canvas. She was threading a narrative, one that would allow them to walk beside her on this artistic journey. The prospect of sharing both her art and story shifted her anxiety into determination. As she practiced speaking aloud, her voice quivered with newfound strength. This painting is a reflection of my journey. Each color represents parts of who I am, everything from my fears to my hopes. She imagined each family member's expression, preparing for the impact of her words. I want you to understand that art isn't just a hobby for me, it's a vital expression of who I am. With her message tightening like a bowstring, Amelia glanced at the time. The dinner was almost upon her. Instead of retreating into fear, she felt a sense of calm settle within. It was time to stand firm in the truth she had crafted. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden light that enveloped the diner. With her canvas and heartfelt narrative in tow, Amelia stepped into the world outside the threshold of transformation and took a deep breath. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation and possibility. As she opened the door to her family's expectations, a sudden thought pierced through her poise: what if her courage ignited a transformation in them, too? But just as quickly, another thought wrestled with that hope. Had she prepared herself for their possible hostility? Would this catalyst push them away, rather than bring them closer? With her heart racing louder than the chatter in her ears, Amelia steeled herself. This dinner was far more than a meal, it was a pivotal moment stitched into the fabric of her identity. The pivotal clash of aspirations and expectations awaited, and her art would be the spark to light it all. Would she emerge as the newfound artist she aspired to be, or would she retreat into the shadows of conformity once again? The stakes had never been higher, and she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The door swung open, revealing her family gathered within. And just like that, the stage was set. Amelia stood at the threshold of her family's home, heart pounding with equal parts fear and determination, the canvas clutched tightly in her arms. The moment felt monumental, a leap into the unknown path that now lay before her. She could almost visualize the past versions of herself, those moments when she had forged a silent pact, abiding by expectations that suffocated her spirit. Tonight, however, she would not retreat. Her family was gathered around the dinner table, the atmosphere buzzing with lively conversation. At the head of the table, her mother looked up, her brow furrowing slightly as she recognized the unyielding resolve etched across Amelia's face. It was that moment of acknowledgement, where her mother's understanding penetrated the veil of expectation, that sparked the first flicker of vulnerability within her. "Amelia, you're here!" her mother exclaimed, masking apprehension with an effort to maintain the usual family warmth. "We were just talking about you." Amelia stepped forward, breath hitching in her throat as her heart raced. "Mom, can I show you something?" The words spilled from her lips, buoyed by an intensity that had never felt so right. At first, the dining room fell silent, chairs scraping against hardwood as unspoken words hung in the air. "What is it?" her father asked, the corners of his mouth hinting at curiosity yet laced with skepticism. With a deep breath, Amelia unveiled the canvas. The painted landscape loomed large in the room, a chaotic burst of colors entwined with her truth. The conversations that had flowed moments before flickered and faded into uncertainty as they stared at her creation, confusion etched on their faces. "It's beautiful," her younger sister breathed, eyes wide with surprise. But her mother's expression remained skeptical, a mix of concern and disapproval swirling beneath her facade. "Ashton, Aaron, what do you think?" Amelia pressed, directing her attention away from her mother's stiff demeanor, desperate for a supportive voice. "It's powerful," Aaron, her older brother, offered tentatively, glancing at their mother. "But why the sudden interest in art, Am?" His question felt like an invasion, prying at the essence of a transformative moment. "I've always had this interest, this need to express myself," Amelia began, her voice steadying as she found her footing in the challenging conversation. "But I've let fear dictate my choices for too long. This painting represents everything I've struggled with: the weight of responsibility, the security of being the daughter you wanted, and the identity I've had to bury." Her mother's face tightened, but confusion mixed with curiosity. "And you think this is the answer?" Turning to art. "Yes," Amelia replied, conviction echoing in her voice. "Art isn't a phase, it's a core part of who I am. It helps me process, confront, and ultimately, grow. Each stroke represents my journey and reminds me that I don't have to fit into what you or anyone else expects me to be." Her mother's eyes softened briefly, but then the wall returned, igniting a quiet fury. "But what about stability? What will our friends say?" What will you say, Mom? What do you want me to be? The words tumbled out before she could catch them, barbs entwined with a plea, a desperate call for her mother to acknowledge a truth she could no longer ignore. Amelia, her mother started slowly, as if sifting through layers of unexpressed intentions buried beneath years of unspoken tension. You know I only want what's best for you. Yes, but what's best for me might not be what you once envisioned, Amelia pressed. I'm not just a reflection of your ideals. I'm here, struggling and striving for my own version of fulfillment. This painting is a declaration of independence. There was a tangible pause, an unbroken hush filled with the weight of unasserted stories. Amelia's heart raced, fear mingling with a newfound belief that her truth could be a bridge, not a storm, to understanding. As her family absorbed her words, she held her breath, desperate for their acceptance, yearning for them to see beyond the surface of what was familiar. Finally, her mother spoke, voice quivering but resolute. You have a talent, Amelia, one I've always respected, even if I struggled to express it. But it's frightening to think of you living outside the security we know. Amelia leveled her gaze steadily. But you have to let me choose what security looks like for me. The fear is just an invitation to redefine what I want. I can still be part of this family, but on my own terms. And with that, Amelia caught visible ripples of understanding breaking through the surface of her mother's stern exterior. Perhaps the painting spoken through her brush allowed them all to question the status quo, prompting a journey towards heartfelt understanding. Gradually, her father leaned forward, the softness weaving into his expression as he spoke. We may not fully understand, but we want you to be happy. The words felt like a warm balm, easing the tension that had held space in the room. If art brings you joy, then it's worth pursuing. Amelia's heart soared, the weight of uncertainty lifting as her family began reframing their perspective. Would you come to my gallery show? She asked, knowing it was a bold step, yet one that flowed with hope. Yes, her mother answered slowly, with newfound resolve. Take us with you on this journey. Show us your art. With every word exchanged around the table that night, Amelia felt the threads of connection tightening, a tapestry of acceptance weaving through her family narrative and illuminating the pathway ahead. Each brushstroke in her heart, once cloaked in fear, now sang a vibrant promise of discovery and the hope of embracing individuality. In that moment of communion flooded with acceptance, Amelia experienced her true transformation, stepping into her artistry as an act of bravery and evolving into the artist and daughter she had always aspired to be, confident, recognized, and fulfilled. The future shimmered bright as she glanced at her painting one last time, knowing that this was only the beginning of the story she would continue to tell, one brushstroke at a time. Now is the time for you. Stand with Amelia. You need to subscribe to the channel now for more transformative stories that inspire change and courage. Leave a like now. Your support fuels the journey for those brave enough to embrace their true selves. Comment below with your reactions about this remarkable transformation and your theories on what happens next. Share instantly with at least 5 friends who need a reminder that it's never too late to chase their dreams. Don't wait even one more second to be part of this amazing community.